Wow. Wow, what a night. So many friends and family and people we've worked with over the years. I kind of feel like I'm having my bar mitzvah, or a little bit of a roast from Stephen. But thank you all again for coming tonight. It's just a joyous evening. And thank you, Stephen and Matt, for those kind words. And thanks to the Academy. We're really thrilled to be here tonight. And we'd like to also congratulate Cicely Tyson, Lilo Schifrin, and Marvin Levy on their Oscars. And one special shout out for our dear friend, Marvin. Marvin, happy birthday. Yeah, there you are. Because we are the first couple to receive this honor, I guess it's only fitting that I began my career in movies working for another creative couple, Peter Bogdanovich and Polly Platt. I had met them at a party in 1966 for John Ford's daughter, Barbara, who was a film editor and was married to Ken Curtis, one of Ford's repertory of actors and a good friend of my parents. Peter and Polly were in town doing a documentary on Mr. Ford, and Peter was very excited that night because a producer named Roger Corman had just offered him his first directing job. It wasn't going to happen right away because they still had no script, and they'd have to write it, and then they would do that back in New York. Now, despite the fact I was majoring in political science at UCLA, as everyone was back then, and despite the fact I knew nothing about movies, I offered to help Peter and Polly if they ever came back. And sure enough, about 3 months later, my dad called and said, "Did you meet a guy named Bogslanovich or something at the Ford party?" And I said, "Yes, why? He wants you to call him." For those under 30, that was how social media worked back then. Someone would call your dad on a landline, leave a message, he would write it down, and a couple of weeks later, he might remember to tell you to call that person back. So I called Peter back, and he said he and Polly were going to make this movie called Targets, and would I be interested in working on it? I said, "Can I start in an hour?" And then I asked, "Well, what would you want me to do?" He answered, "I don't know, I've never made a movie before. Just come over." So I did. And without knowing it, I began to learn the skills that a producer needs to solve problems. And I began to understand the challenges in helping the director get their vision up on the screen. And this could not have been a better starting point for me in becoming a creative producer. Because with Peter as the director and Polly as the production designer, I got to see and solve problems from the creative side. Targets was an on-the-job film school and the best introduction to filmmaking one could ever have. I watched Peter block and set up shots and how brilliantly he worked with the actors. And I learned from Polly how a producer should be hands-on in paying attention to detail. And these first on-the-job lessons I got from them have stayed with me to this day. Now I know you're wondering about that political science degree. Well, I did graduate from UCLA and was on my way to law school when I realized I had fallen in love with the process of making movies. Luckily, Peter rescued me from what might have been a very unhappy legal career when he called in again and asked me to come to Texas for the last picture show. I immediately accepted the job of location manager, and that soon led to being promoted to associate producer on Paper Moon. For the rest of the 70s, I was lucky to do several more pictures with Peter and 3 other visionary directors, Walter Hill, one of them. And a couple of other guys named Orson Welles and Martin Scorsese, but they're not here tonight. And I was also lucky to be mentored by legendary producers Larry Gordon, who's here tonight, Irwin Winkler, and George Lucas. And on the personal side, I was single and happily married to the movies that I was making. And then in 1979, Steven changed all that when he hired Kathy to be his secretary assistant on Raiders of the Lost Ark. I never dreamed I would meet someone who loved making movies as much as I did. But working with Steven, Kathy and I became friends and collaborators, and eventually we became an actual family. Thank you all again for this wonderful honor and celebration, and thanks to all the producers and directors who have given us this opportunity to take this joyful journey together and pursue the passion we love, making movies and telling stories. And in particular, thank you to Peter Bogdanovich for his trust and loyalty in me. We're still working together half a century later after he took a chance on me. And how fitting is it for us to have just produced our 10th picture together, the completion of Orson Welles' final film, The Other Side of the Wind. And now I'm going to pass the baton to my partner in movies and in life, Kathleen Kennedy.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm going to recover from the couch story. I'm just starting there. Well, I have to say it's pretty amazing to be standing here, obviously with Frank and Steven, and realizing that we now join the company of so many greats that have received this award in the past. Filmmakers such as William Wyler, Jack Warner, Steven, Francis Coppola, Alfred Hitchcock, George Lucas, legends all. And both of us are very proud that you find us worthy to be honored as part of this Hollywood legacy. It also means a lot to have both Matt and Steven here to present the award to us. I don't know what happened to Matt, but I think he's still here. And we're very honored to share the Thalberg Award as the first married couple. I'm also very proud to be the first woman to accept this award. But I'm also not the first to deserve it. And I'm 100% sure I'm not the last. I've always loved the movies, and I've been enthralled by the power of story. Steven said this when he accepted the award 30 years ago. That power begins with the written word. I feel extraordinarily lucky to have worked with some of the best screenwriters and directors in the business, and also to have witnessed so many advances in technology to help tell those stories. But those advances are only made powerful and emotional in their support of storytelling. That blueprint, those words, set everything in motion. And without great writing, we have nothing to produce. When I began working with Steven, he handed me a script for his next film. He said, "Read this, it's my next movie, but don't tell anybody anything." And that directive is pretty much what he tells you every time he hands you anything. That script was Raiders of the Lost Ark, written by Lawrence Kasdan, and remains today one of the best scripts I've ever read. When I finished reading the script, Steven was waiting expectantly to hear what I thought. I said, "It's great, but how are we going to make this?" And he said, "Call producer Frank Marshall." So I called Mr. Marshall. I called him Mr. Marshall repeatedly until he said, "Could you please stop calling me that? I'm Frank." He then offered to come over to our offices and introduce himself. I was expecting this much older man, maybe mid-50s, but in walked this handsome young guy, and I have to admit my first reaction was, "Hello, Mr. Marshall." So after some back and forth, I told Frank that Stephen asked me to build some models of the truck chase in Raiders, but I confessed I hadn't done much model building. Frank was immediately excited and agreed to help me. He loved building models. So to quote Humphrey Bogart's line to Claude Rains in Casablanca, it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. That friendship is now actually in its 32nd year of marriage and 40 years of collaboration. And I'm so grateful to share a career and a home with someone whose character and convictions, his decency and humor are in evidence every day. And as proud as we are of our movies, we have two wonderful daughters who are the heart and soul of our lives, Lily and Megan. And when they were little, we would throw them into backpacks and carry them through the redwoods while making Jurassic Park, or sometimes we would create schoolrooms on the set of Indiana Jones. And during our time away, we have worked tirelessly in tandem to watch them grow and to make sure that their lives are defined by creativity, quality, and most of all, kindness. These are the same values we bring to our filmmaking, and the same values the Thalberg Award must always continue to represent. I've been fortunate to have had the chance to work with extraordinary people to help reinforce those ideals. My mother, my father, Frank, and of course, Stephen. Stephen, Frank, and I formed Amblin Entertainment in 1981 with a goal that I think would make Mr. Thalberg proud, to tell hopeful stories about triumph of the human spirit and the ability to rise above circumstance. And even with all the exciting changes happening within film and motion pictures, with all the tools being invented that help us tell those stories, those fundamental values that I look for and strive for will never change. But we all know there are changes in our industry that should be embraced, ones that must be embraced. For as our industry grows and changes, who gets to tell their stories needs to grow and change as well. I know firsthand how allowing new voices at the table can change someone's life. My opportunity to work in television was the result of a lawsuit back in 1973 filed against a station because women did not occupy any technical jobs. That lawsuit opened a door for me, and it is just one reason why I so passionately believe that each of us has the obligation to ensure that everyone who has a story to tell be given the opportunity that I and many of you in this room had. And it is my hope that with this inclusion of these powerful new voices, we might just bring the world back to its senses, and maybe, just maybe, shatter a few glass ceilings along the way. So tonight, to end this, I just want to say we are profoundly grateful to be here tonight with all of you. And I mean, it's just incredible that Oprah is here and Quincy is here, and we've worked with Marvin Levy and Stephen's here, and it feels like some kind of amazing reunion that I can't quite believe the stars lined up in quite the way they did. But There's nothing that's more important than to be able to experience something like this with people that you genuinely care about and have been a part of your life for a long time. So this is an incredible honor and a privilege, and we thank you.